from the studios of 1689 Society, presenting KingCast. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Martin from 1689 Society,
And this is Rob.
and we want to, use this episode, this show, as an introduction show to a new podcast that we're going to be starting called KingCast, because Christ is King, and we're doing a podcast for Christ the King. And I know we're running with 1689 Society for a while, which is good. You know, like I'll always love that name and that brand. But I just figured this podcast, I wanted to extend beyond the 1689 world. So we just thought we would rebrand a little bit for the podcast's sake and just call this one King's Cast. The King Cast. I got to get the name right. King Cast. But yeah, so we want to use this episode just to let you know who we are, what we're about, what we envision for the podcast, and all things of that nature. So let's get right into it, bro. Go ahead and.
All right, so I have a couple questions.
All right.
That's gonna really be the introduction for this segment.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is gonna be, why another podcast?
Why another podcast? That's an excellent question, Broccoli Rob. You know,
Thanks,
there's
bro.
hundreds of podcasts out there. I'm sure there's podcasts that are from guys that are much smarter than we are, guys that are much dumber than we are. I'm sure there's a podcast for everything out there. But see, I think that's in a sense why I wanted to do another podcast, was because I felt like there wasn't a podcast that truly applied the gospel and all the implications, all the ramifications to all of life.
Right.
You know, I think I would be a self-identified Kuyperian, which
I would completely agree.
so and there's not too many 1689 Kuyperian post-millennial
That are Hispanic.
Mexican. Even aside from that, you know, like sympathetic toward theonomic, functionality in civil spheres. There's just so much out there that, it's good stuff. I'm not trying to hate. I'm not saying that no one's doing good things, but it's either all theology and no practice, or it's all practice and no theology, or when it does get into the practice, it just keeps it to quote unquote the spiritual realm,
Right.
where we want to see a podcast truly for all of life from a 1689 perspective. But at the end of the day, we're just Christians,
Right.
and we want to promote Christianity to all of life. So, what would you say, I think you listen to more podcasts than I do, what do you think is a reason on your end that you want to see this type of podcast be released?
I think the main reason it's that I think it's very helpful for the new Christian. I think just starting out listening to stuff really on a certain topic, it just really helped me out a lot, just to really kind of like just make it all fit in with Christianity and really let me grasp certain truths that I wasn't maybe getting somewhere else, or of course, like diving into scripture. But I think just certain podcasts right now that I listen to are very like straight to the point, and being able to being that they're so short, it helps with just listening to it like over and over, or just being able to send it to someone and you could chop it up with a friend or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think so many times as new believers, young believers, even as seasoned believers, we forget, to consider, things beyond at times the scriptures, or how do the scriptures apply to everyday life. So we're going to, on this podcast, I hope, go into deep theological truths and deep theological realities, but we also want to address different things that are just plain as day, like Christian, view of politics, Christian view of marriage, Christian view of being an entrepreneur and owning a business, Christian view of education, Christian view of COVID. There's so many things that I think are left out in the podcast world, and I get it. There's so many things to cover, but it has to be a balance between our theology, our head, and our heart, and all of life,
Yeah, and I think for sure just remembering that the gospel gives us freedom to expand in an area, and then to really dive into these areas where we think not that many people are diving into. I think the reform world is a lot smaller than we think,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not as expanded as we think.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, if someone brings up a certain topic, it's like we could dive into that, or
Yeah.
you know, from the president to the way a government runs to the way the county runs,
Yeah.
So it could
To
be
economics.
it could be anything.
Sociology, fracking. I don't care what it is. The
Yeah.
point is that there's no topic that a Christian can apply the lordship of Christ to, and I think that's really what it boils down to for me, and why I wanted to start the podcast, because I feel like so many times in Christianity they have a division between the spiritual realm
Mm.
and the physical realm, and they kind of create this dichotomy, and they say, well, these are Christian things and these aren't Christian things, and these are secular things and these are sacred things, where
Mm-hmm.
really the Christian worldview is to look at all of life,
Mm-hmm.
look at all of spheres of life, and ask, how does the lordship of Christ apply
Right.
to every single one of these areas? And sadly, the modern church has deduced the gospel
Right.
to merely be a, how do I get out of heaven? How do I get out of hell, and how do I get into heaven?
Mm-hmm.
And then from salvation to eternity, or glorification, it's kind of like this constant theme of almost like no real action on the believer,
Mhm.
and no real, movement of the believer to seek to influence society or become a part of society in a beneficial way for the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just, like I said, deduce the gospel to just merely, obviously it is this. I'm not trying to say the gospel isn't the atonement. The gospel
Mhm.
isn't a justification by faith alone. The gospel isn't the cross of Christ. Of course it is, but
Mm-hmm.
from there we're called to then live a life to his glory. And what does that look like?
Right.
And that's what I really hope that we'll be able to cover on this podcast. In a sense, like, now what? You know?
It's not just like the local church shouldn't be an add-on to your life, or just a box you're gonna check off on a Sunday, or I just came to church and I sang a couple songs, I'm good. It's really beyond that. It's
Mhm.
like, how can you take the gospel from Sunday to every day, but not just that, to every area?
Exactly. I think, sadly, like, this podcast was kind of born out of like a reaction to what I'm seeing a lot in today's culture. Oh, Christians shouldn't have an opinion on, government lockdowns, or just do the loving thing, or Christians shouldn't mix religion and politics, and like, so much going on. Is like such a truncated view of the gospel, such a narrow Christian worldview, where it's literally like making Christianity be spineless. And I do blame the modern church in many ways, because the sermons that they preach are so shallow.
Mm-hmm.
The sermons that are being preached in most churches today are just so, like, shallow, like, and really there's no substance to them, and it's sad. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions, like, what we want to cover as far as today's episode, but that's kind of just why we think another podcast is useful. I don't think anyone else exists. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I know other people out there exist who are like us, who think like us. But it is very, very rare to find a 1689, confessionalist who believes in covenant theology, who is a presuppositionalist, who also embraces, what I would call a functional theonomic view of civil government, meaning we should be seeking to implement biblical laws,
Right.
and godly laws, and God-honoring laws, and also sympathetic toward the Bonson camp, sympathetic toward the Rushdoony camp, clearly disagreeing with them in certain areas, but still sympathetic toward many of the good that they write.
Right.
Very sympathetic toward John Frame's view of the Christian life, Poitras, Kuyperian, love Doug Wilson, love Canon Press, and post-millennial. It's just, there's just not many of us out there. And I just don't feel like there's a lay level, two guys chilling in a bedroom,
Right.
with the fake little studio talking about these things, And I'm so thankful for so much that is out there, but hopefully we can seek to influence 17 listeners that we'll have on this podcast regularly.
Right. And at least from like our group, like the group of our age,
Yeah.
everyone that we listen to is a lot older than us.
Yeah.
So hopefully will influence and maybe even meet some guys our age.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, if there's another guy out there who's 1689 and loves post-millennialism and the general equity of God's law that wants to be applied, loves politics, reach out. Let us know that you exist, and let's plan a 4-person network. And I say that jokingly just because I'm being honest. There's not many people who are even contextual, who think like using good aesthetics in a church or using good art and using good music and trying to create and be creatives. It's like there's just so much of good that I see in so many movements. And again, not to say in the prideful way that, oh, I have it all figured out and I brought all these movements together. But I definitely see, like, why are the creatives so good at what they do, but yet they neglect theology and politics and all of life stuff? Or
Right.
why the theologians so good,
Mm-hmm.
but then they're outdated, non-contextual, dusty, and crusty?
Mm-hmm.
Or why are the post-mill guys so good and the theonomic guys so good, but then they forget that gospel-centeredness, that
Mm-hmm.
Christ-centered focus? Why are the gospel-centered guys so good, but then they forget, like the involvement in the civil spheres of life and
Yeah.
not just being nice guys? Like, there's just so much good out there, and I just feel like I just want one podcast that brings all the best of the best
Right.
and puts it into one worldview, and we'll call that the 1689 Society worldview. I don't know what we'll call it, but that's literally what we're coming from. And and I'll be honest, like, a lot of people have asked me to start a podcast, and I've always said, oh, no one cares what I have to say, and I still stand by that. No one cares what I have to say. Or people have even said, like, oh, like from the negative perspective, like, oh, why do you do that? Like, why do you even want a podcast, or why do you even post on Facebook or social media? And those ones are the ones that like really get me down. I'm like, dang, like I'm lame. Like, why do I post, or why do?
Right.
But you know what? I honestly don't care. Like, if anything, I'll do it for my kids, and they can hear
Mm-hmm.
my voice when I'm older, and then be able to listen to these tracks and be like, dang, that's crazy. That's cool that you did that, Dad, or whatever.
Yeah.
But if God uses this, to bring everyone to a Christ-centered, gospel-centered, all of life
Yeah.
worldview, then I'll be happy if like there's just 10 of us that grow because of this podcast.
Right. I think I'll be the main one that grows.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, and then just a little bit about myself. I'm a pastor of a church plant in Moreno Valley, California, right in the heart of California, SoCal. I love it here. I'm born and raised here. Many opportunities to leave, but many more gospel opportunities to stay here. And yeah, I got 2 kids. Probably shouldn't say that, because then someone's gonna look for my kids. No, but that's just a little bit about myself. Went to seminary. Went to Reformed Baptist Seminary. Shout out to Dr. Gonzalez. Love that guy. And yeah, just like I said, a couple guys, and our church plant is almost 2 years old now. Average about 50 to 60 people on the Lord's Day, and a bunch of kids, and just have a lot of vision. I have a lot of vision for the future. Want to start a classical school. Hopefully we can start a college or university, and these might be pipe dreams, but I'll always be that Christian with pipe dreams rather than the Christian with no vision.
Right. Right.
And I'm not spitting bars. I'm just. But what about you, bro? Tell us about yourself. Just a normal cat.
I'm just a normal everyday cat. I've been a member at Christ Redeemer for about a little bit after it started, maybe like a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I got baptized there. And yeah, it's just been a blessing to me. Just growing and really being a part of a local church, and just doing life with these people. It's been a blessing. So for sure, I'm just encouraged, and then also that, having a local church, you can actually talk to your pastor. I'm more than fortunate enough to really, be able to get that, one-on-one time that everybody dreams of.
That's hilarious.
So we chop it up on every day. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that, and just always just trying to stay gospel centered, and
Amen.
really just striving for the Lord and during these trying times.
Yep. Yeah, I'm tempted just to go off on a bunch of tangents right now, but I'll refrain and get my thoughts together and try to plan out some episodes. And obviously, we encourage all input from you guys, and
Any request?
any requests, even the haters. It's funny, like whenever I post on 1689 Society, like they're just those people who literally never say anything positive, never give like a 100 on it, which I don't care. But anytime I slip up or say something, it's like boom on it, you know. So honestly, I've grown accustomed to just having people. You know, when you have like a following of 12,000 or whatever, 15,000, you're gonna get those people. But
right.
I'm okay with it. I know that I don't fit in any theological camp. You know, I'm too Baptist for, you know, the Presby guys, and then I'm too Presby for the Baptist guys, and I believe in baptizing very young children at the age of 4, 5, 6, and
Right.
that's what I mean by that. Where, you know, the 689 crew is like, no, you got to wait till a certain age or whatever.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'm going on tangents, but I really feel like a theological nomad in many sense. But I pray that I still have a biblical vision and a biblical gospel, and that I don't depart from Christ ultimately. But it's kind of you got any more questions on your phone?
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and hopefully we can keep at it. Our goal is one show a week. Hold us to it. One show a week. All right then, guys. You guys have a good one.
Late.